The fastest way to reveal a person's character is to watch how they treat someone they believe has no power. At exactly 8:30 on a cool autumn morning in downtown Chicago, Monica Reynolds stepped through the revolving doors of Caldwell Technologies and entered one of the most impressive corporate headquarters in the city. Sunlight streamed through 40-foot glass walls, reflecting across polished marble floors and illuminating a lobby that looked more like a luxury hotel than an office building. Employees hurried past carrying laptops, coffee cups, and presentation folders. Digital screens displayed company achievements. Executive assistants moved with purpose between elevators and reception areas. Monica paused for a moment near the entrance and quietly took in the scene. She wore a simple navy blazer over a light blouse, dark slacks, and comfortable shoes. A worn leather briefcase rested at her side. Nothing about her appearance demanded attention. Nothing announced wealth, influence, or importance. She approached the reception desk with a warm smile. "Good morning. I have an appointment scheduled for today." The receptionist nodded politely and checked the system. "One moment, please." Monica stepped aside and waited. Several minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. The lobby continued buzzing with activity while Monica remained calm near a seating area reserved for executive guests. She opened a folder and began reviewing several documents covered with handwritten notes. Every so often she looked out through the towering windows at the Chicago skyline rising beyond the river. A few floors above the lobby, Ethan Caldwell was preparing for one of the most important weeks in company history. As chief executive officer, he carried the confidence of a man accustomed to making decisions quickly. Investors, board members, and senior leaders constantly sought his attention. His calendar was packed from morning until evening. Efficiency mattered. Appearances mattered. First impressions mattered. Shortly before 9 o'clock, Ethan stepped out of a private elevator accompanied by several executives. Their conversation centered on expansion plans and upcoming meetings. As they crossed the lobby, Ethan's eyes briefly landed on Monica sitting in the executive guest section. He slowed his pace. The seating area was typically reserved for board members, major partners, and invited guests. Monica continued reading her documents without noticing him. Ethan frowned slightly. "Who is that?" he quietly asked an assistant. The assistant glanced toward Monica. "I'm not sure." Ethan looked again. A simple briefcase. Modest clothing. No visible credentials. Within seconds, he had formed an opinion. He approached the reception desk and spoke in a low voice. The receptionist appeared uncomfortable as she listened. Nearby employees sensed the tension but continued working. Moments later, a security officer was asked to verify whether Monica belonged in the executive area. When the officer approached, Monica looked up with a calm smile. "Good morning," she said kindly. The officer introduced himself and politely asked a few questions. Monica answered without hesitation and remained completely composed. Several people in the lobby began watching from a distance. The situation was awkward, yet Monica showed no sign of embarrassment or frustration. She simply closed her folder and listened respectfully. Across the lobby, Ethan observed the interaction with quiet certainty. He believed he was protecting company protocol. What he did not know was that the woman sitting by the window had already changed the future of Caldwell Technologies long before she ever stepped through the front door that morning. Monica Reynolds answered every question from the security officer with the same calm professionalism she brought into every room she entered. Her voice never rose. Her expression never changed. The officer quickly realized she was cooperative and respectful, and the tension that had briefly settled over the lobby began to fade. "Thank you for your patience, ma'am," he said politely. Monica smiled. "You are just doing your job." The officer nodded appreciatively before stepping away to verify information through the reception desk. Around them, the morning rush continued. Employees crossed the lobby carrying tablets and coffee cups. Executive assistants hurried toward elevators. Conversations echoed beneath the high glass ceilings. Yet a few people continued glancing toward Monica, curious about the woman who remained so composed under uncomfortable circumstances. She returned to her seat by the window and reopened the folder resting on her lap. Pages filled with notes, charts, and handwritten observations lay neatly organized inside. Every so often she reviewed a document, made a small correction, and moved to the next page. Outside, The Chicago River reflected the sunlight that poured between rows of downtown skyscrapers. Nearly 30 minutes later, a young receptionist suddenly looked distressed. Her computer system had frozen while she was processing visitor registrations, causing several scheduled meetings to disappear from the calendar. Calls immediately started coming in from different departments asking about missing appointments. The young woman tried to resolve the problem herself, but the more she clicked through the software, the more confused she became. Monica noticed the growing panic from across the lobby. Without hesitation, she stood and approached the desk. "Would you like an extra set of eyes?" she asked gently. The receptionist looked embarrassed. "I do not want to bother you." Monica smiled. "You are not bothering me." Together, they reviewed the schedule. Within minutes, Monica identified a simple synchronization error that had duplicated several entries and hidden others. The receptionist followed her suggestions and watched the appointments reappear one by one. Relief spread across her face. "You just saved my morning." Monica laughed softly. Technology usually looks more complicated than it really is. The receptionist thanked her repeatedly. Nearby employees noticed the interaction. A few exchanged surprised glances. The woman who had just been questioned by security was now calmly helping solve problems no one else had time to address. Later that morning, an elderly visitor entered the building carrying several folders and looking visibly confused. He studied a directory near the elevators before sighing in frustration. Monica walked over. "Can I help you find something?" The man explained that he was trying to reach a conference room on the 22nd floor, but could not understand the building layout. Monica listened carefully before showing him exactly where to go and how to access the correct elevator bank. "Thank you," he said with obvious relief. "I was afraid I was going to miss my meeting." "You will make it just fine," Monica replied. The man smiled and continued on his way. From an upper-level balcony overlooking the lobby, Olivia Caldwell watched the scene unfold. As part of her leadership internship, she spent much of her day observing company operations. Earlier, she had witnessed the security interaction involving Monica. Now she watched the same woman helping employees and visitors without expecting anything in return. Something about the contrast caught her attention. Most people placed in that situation would have been upset. Monica seemed focused only on helping others. Olivia found hers. By early afternoon, the sunlight pouring through the towering glass walls of Caldwell Technologies had shifted from bright white to warm gold. The reflections stretched across the marble floor and climbed the polished columns that framed the massive lobby. Monica Reynolds remained seated near the executive guest area, quietly reviewing documents while the company around her moved through another busy workday. Hours had passed since she first arrived, yet her patience never seemed to fade. Employees continued rushing between meetings. Visitors arrived and departed. Elevators opened and closed with mechanical precision. Through it all, Monica remained calm, focused, and observant. Several people who worked in the building had begun recognizing her. The receptionist smiled whenever she looked in Monica's direction. The security officer who had questioned her earlier now greeted her with a respectful nod each time he passed. Even employees who had never spoken to her found themselves curious. There was something unusual about her presence. She carried herself with quiet confidence, but not arrogance. She appeared comfortable in an environment where most visitors seemed intimidated. Several floors above the lobby, Ethan Caldwell sat at the head of a conference table overlooking the Chicago skyline. The executive boardroom reflected everything people expected from a successful technology company. Interactive displays covered one wall. Financial projections filled large digital screens. Senior executives reviewed acquisition opportunities, partnership strategies, and expansion forecasts. Ethan listened carefully while occasionally offering observations that immediately shaped the direction of the discussion. Years of success had reinforced his belief that instincts mattered. He trusted his judgment. More importantly, he trusted his ability to evaluate people quickly. During a break between presentations, one executive reviewed preparations for an important board meeting scheduled later that day. "The strategic investment discussion has been moved to 4 o'clock, he explained. "Several representatives will be arriving this afternoon." Ethan nodded without much concern. The company had spent months pursuing a major partnership opportunity. Investors regularly visited headquarters. Meetings like this were common. "Everything ready?" Ethan asked. "Yes," the executive replied. "We are simply waiting for final confirmation from the lead representative." Ethan stood and walked toward the window. Beyond the glass, Chicago stretched in every direction beneath a clear blue sky. The city represented competition, opportunity, and ambition. Everything he had built stood because he refused to lower standards. At least that was how he viewed it. Across the room, Olivia Caldwell listened quietly. Earlier, she had returned to the lobby several times under the pretense of observing operations. In reality, she wanted to learn more about Monica. Every interaction she witnessed raised new questions. Monica treated everyone with the same level of respect regardless of position. Receptionists, security staff, visitors. Nobody seemed beneath her attention. That detail stayed with Olivia. Later that afternoon, Olivia found Monica once again sitting near the window. Gathering her courage, she approached. "Hello," she said. Monica looked up and smiled warmly. "Hello." Olivia introduced herself and took a seat nearby. Their conversation remained simple at first. Weather, Chicago architecture, the view from the building. Yet within minutes, Olivia found herself enjoying the discussion. Monica possessed an easy warmth that made people feel comfortable. She listened carefully before speaking. She asked thoughtful questions. She never tried to impress anyone. As they spoke, Monica's phone vibrated softly. She glanced at the screen and read a short message. For the first time all day, a faint smile crossed her face. Olivia noticed immediately. "Good news?" she asked. Monica slipped the phone back into her briefcase. "Perhaps," she replied. Then she looked toward the elevators where employees continued moving through the building. The afternoon sunlight reflected across the glass walls surrounding them. Somewhere above, executives prepared for a meeting they believed would shape the future of the company. None of them realized that the person holding the most important decision had already spent nearly an entire day sitting quietly in their lobby. As the afternoon moved closer to 4 o'clock, a subtle tension began spreading through Caldwell Technologies. Executive assistants moved more quickly through the hallways. Conference rooms were checked twice. Presentation materials were reviewed one final time. The upcoming strategic investment meeting had become the most important topic inside the building. Yet down in the lobby, Monica Reynolds remained exactly where she had been for most of the day. Sunlight poured through the massive glass walls, bathing the marble floors in warm shades of gold and amber. She sat quietly near the executive guest area, reviewing documents and occasionally glancing toward the Chicago skyline beyond the windows. Olivia Caldwell had returned upstairs after their conversation, but she could not stop thinking about Monica. There was something unusual about her confidence. Most people would have become frustrated after waiting so long. Monica seemed completely at peace. Meanwhile, several floors above, Ethan Caldwell concluded another executive briefing. Financial forecasts filled the screens surrounding the boardroom. Market projections suggested enormous opportunities if the company secured the partnership under discussion. Ethan listened carefully before gathering his notes. "We cannot afford mistakes today," he told his leadership team. "Everything must be handled professionally." The executives nodded. Everyone understood what was at stake. As Ethan left the conference room and entered the executive elevator, one assistant informed him that an unidentified visitor was still occupying the executive guest section downstairs. Ethan immediately knew who she meant. His expression tightened slightly. Hours had passed, and the woman was still there. In his mind, her continued presence represented a disruption. The elevator descended toward the lobby. When the doors opened, Ethan stepped out accompanied by 2 senior managers. Employees immediately moved aside as he crossed the polished floor. Conversations quieted. The atmosphere shifted. Monica noticed him approaching but remained seated. Ethan stopped several feet away and looked toward the security desk. "Why is she still here?" he asked. The question was directed toward the security officer, who appeared uncomfortable. "Sir, she has been cooperative all day. She says she has an appointment." Ethan glanced toward Monica's worn briefcase and simple clothing. His assumptions returned instantly. An appointment with whom? No one answered immediately. Monica calmly closed her folder and stood. "Good afternoon," she said politely. Ethan barely acknowledged the greeting. "This area is reserved for authorized executive guests." Several employees nearby exchanged nervous glances. The receptionist lowered her eyes. Monica maintained her calm expression. "I understand." Ethan turned toward the security officer. "Please escort her out of the executive section until her credentials can be verified." The request was delivered in a firm business tone, but its impact rippled across the lobby. The security officer hesitated. He had spent the entire day watching Monica help employees, visitors, and staff members. Nothing about her behavior suggested a problem. Across the room, Olivia had just stepped out of an elevator and witnessed the exchange. Her stomach tightened. Something felt wrong. Yet Monica surprised everyone. She simply picked up her briefcase and nodded politely. "That will not be necessary," she said softly. "I can wait elsewhere." There was no anger in her voice. No argument. No scene. Just quiet dignity. As she walked toward a seating area near the windows, golden sunlight reflected across the glass behind her. Ethan watched her leave, convinced he had resolved a minor issue. What he did not know was that somewhere above them, members of the board were rushing through the building searching for a woman they could not afford to lose. The moment Monica moved to the seating area near the windows, an uneasy silence settled across parts of the lobby. Employees returned to their work, but many continued glancing in her direction. The golden afternoon light stretched across the marble floor, creating long reflections that seemed to slow time itself. Monica placed her briefcase beside her chair and calmly looked out at the Chicago skyline. Her expression revealed nothing. No frustration. No embarrassment. No anger. She simply waited. Upstairs, preparations for the strategic investment meeting had entered their final stage. Executives filled the conference room. Presentation screens displayed financial forecasts and long-term growth strategies. Assistants distributed folders around the table while board members arrived one by one. Ethan Caldwell took his seat near the head of the room and reviewed several reports. Everything appeared ready. Then one of the directors entered carrying an expression that immediately changed the atmosphere. "Where is Monica Reynolds?" he asked. Several executives looked up. "She should have arrived hours ago." Another board member checked a message on his phone. "I was told she signed in this morning." The room grew quiet. Ethan barely paid attention at first. The name meant nothing to him. The director continued. "We cannot start without her." Another executive frowned. "Who exactly is Monica Reynolds?" Several members of the board exchanged surprised looks. "She is the lead representative," one of them replied. "She controls final approval." Suddenly every conversation stopped. Ethan slowly lowered the report in his hands. Final approval for what? The chairman looked directly at him. "For the $340 million investment partnership." A wave of silence swept through the room. Ethan sat motionless. "And nobody knows where she is?" The chairman immediately stood. "Find her." Within minutes, phones were ringing throughout the building. Administrative staff checked visitor logs. Assistants searched meeting schedules. Security personnel reviewed sign-in records. Down in the lobby, Monica remained seated by the window, watching sunlight reflect off nearby buildings. A few moments later, the receptionist received an urgent call. Her eyes widened. "She is here," she whispered. "She has been here all day." The words spread like electricity. The receptionist pointed toward the seating area. Several employees turned simultaneously. The security officer stared in disbelief. Before anyone could react, the board chairman and multiple directors emerged from the executive elevators and hurried across the lobby. Their footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Employees stopped walking. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Everyone watched. Monica looked up as the group approached. The chairman immediately extended his hand. "Ms. Reynolds, we have been looking everywhere for you." The lobby froze. The receptionist covered her mouth. The security officer blinked in shock. Nearby employees exchanged stunned glances. Monica stood and greeted the chairman warmly. "Good afternoon. We are very sorry for the delay," the chairman said. "The board is ready whenever you are." Several directors greeted her respectfully. One thanked her for making the trip. Another asked if she needed anything before the meeting. Across the lobby, the executive elevator doors opened once again. Ethan stepped out just in time to witness the scene. His eyes moved from the board members to Monica, then back again. For the first time all day, uncertainty appeared on his face. The chairman turned toward him. "Ethan, I would like you to meet Monica Reynolds." The pause that followed felt endless. "She is the lead investor overseeing the $340 million partnership." The entire lobby fell silent. And in a single breathtaking moment, every assumption Ethan had made throughout the day collapsed beneath the weight of the truth. For several long seconds, Nobody in the lobby seemed capable of speaking. The golden afternoon sunlight continued pouring through the towering glass walls, but everything else felt frozen in place. Employees stood motionless. Visitors stopped walking. Even the soft sounds of conversation that normally filled the building seemed to disappear. Monica Reynolds remained calm at the center of it all. Her expression did not change. The same quiet confidence she had carried throughout the day remained unchanged despite the sudden shift in attention surrounding her. Ethan Caldwell felt the weight of every eye in the lobby. Only minutes earlier he had been convinced he was enforcing company protocol. Now he stood face to face with the person responsible for approving the largest investment opportunity his company had pursued in years. The chairman smiled apologetically toward Monica. "We sincerely regret the confusion this afternoon." Monica offered a polite nod. "These things happen." Her answer only deepened the discomfort spreading across the faces around her. Most people in that situation would have expressed frustration. Some would have demanded explanations. Monica didn't either. The chairman gestured toward the executive elevators. "The board is assembled and waiting whenever you are ready." Together, they began walking toward the elevators. Several directors joined them while continuing a discussion about market opportunities and long-term strategy. The conversation immediately revealed something that shocked many employees listening nearby. Monica was not merely attending the meeting. She was leading significant portions of it. Her observations were thoughtful, specific, and respected by everyone around her. Ethan followed several steps behind. The realization settled deeper with each passing second. When the elevator doors closed, silence lingered across the lobby. Employees exchanged stunned glances. The receptionist slowly lowered herself into her chair. The security officer stared toward the elevator bank. Olivia watched everything unfold while processing a lesson she suspected her father would never forget. Upstairs, the boardroom overlooking downtown Chicago glowed beneath the warm afternoon sun. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed miles of city skyline stretching toward the horizon. The investment committee, senior executives, and board members took their seats around a polished conference table. Monica sat near the center of the room and opened the same worn briefcase that so many people had dismissed earlier in the day. Inside were detailed reports, market analyses, strategic forecasts, and handwritten notes. Within minutes, the discussion began. As presentations moved across the screens, Monica asked insightful questions about leadership, culture, employee retention, and long-term sustainability. Her understanding of the business extended far beyond financial projections. She examined how decisions affected people, how leadership influenced performance, how culture shaped results. The more she spoke, the more obvious her expertise became. Ethan listened carefully. Every answer Monica provided dismantled another assumption he had made. He realized he had spent the entire day evaluating appearance instead of substance. He had mistaken simplicity for insignificance. During a brief pause in the discussion, Monica stood and walked toward the windows. The city reflected beneath the late afternoon sunlight. For a moment, she simply looked out across the skyline. The room grew quiet. Several board members reviewed notes, while others exchanged observations. Ethan watched from across the table. What struck him most was not her influence or authority. It was her grace. After everything that had happened, she remained composed, professional, and focused on the future rather than the insult. The sunlight reflected across the glass, casting warm golden patterns throughout the room. In that quiet moment, before any decisions were finalized and before any apologies were spoken, Ethan began understanding something far more important than the investment itself. Success could build a company, but character determined whether that success truly deserved respect. The meeting continued for more than an hour as executives, board members, and investment representatives examined every aspect of Caldwell Technologies. Financial forecasts were reviewed. Expansion strategies were challenged. Long-term objectives were discussed in detail. Throughout the conversation, Monica Reynolds remained one of the most respected voices in the room. Her questions consistently pushed discussions beyond quarterly profits and into areas many companies ignored: leadership, employee development, trust, accountability. The afternoon sunlight slowly shifted across the boardroom, painting warm reflections across the polished table and floor-to-ceiling windows. Ethan Caldwell listened carefully to every word. Earlier that day, he had viewed Monica as someone who did not belong in his building. Now he was witnessing a level of insight and strategic thinking that few people in the room could match. The contrast forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth. The mistake he had made was not simply professional. It was personal. He had judged someone before learning who she was. Eventually, the chairman of the investment committee stood and addressed the room. "We have completed our review," he announced. "Before we move toward a final recommendation, there is one last matter we would like to discuss." The room became silent. Board members exchanged brief glances. Several executives straightened in their chairs. The atmosphere suddenly felt heavier. The chairman looked toward Monica. "Would you like to begin?" Monica folded her hands calmly on the table. For a moment, she looked out toward the skyline beyond the windows. Then she turned back toward the room. "Successful organizations are not defined solely by numbers," she said. "They're defined by how they treat people when there is nothing to gain from treating them well." Nobody interrupted. The silence itself seemed to acknowledge the importance of her words. "Every company speaks about culture," she continued. "But culture reveals itself in ordinary moments. The receptionist greeting a visitor. The manager listening to an employee. The leader choosing whether to make an assumption or ask a question." Ethan felt every sentence land with unmistakable weight. Monica never mentioned the lobby. She never mentioned security. She never mentioned the humiliation she could have chosen to focus on. Instead, she spoke about principles. The room listened carefully. "Influence creates responsibility," Monica continued. "And responsibility begins with recognizing the humanity and potential in people before their titles, positions, or appearances are known." Several board members nodded. Others quietly took notes. The chairman allowed the silence to linger before speaking again. "Thank you, Ms. Reynolds." Then he turned toward Ethan. "Would you like to respond?" For the first time that afternoon, Ethan hesitated. He slowly stood from his chair. The city stretched behind him through walls of glass, while sunlight reflected across the conference room. Every person present waited. Ethan took a slow breath. "Yes," he said quietly. His voice carried none of its usual certainty. "I would." He looked directly at Monica. "This morning I made assumptions about someone I did not know." The room remained completely silent. "I allowed appearance to influence judgment. I allowed position to influence respect. And I failed to demonstrate the kind of leadership I expect from others." Ethan paused. The admission was difficult, but necessary. "Ms. Reynolds, I owe you an apology." Several executives lowered their eyes. Others sat perfectly still. Ethan continued. "You deserved courtesy and respect from the moment you walked through our doors. Instead, I made a decision without understanding who you were. I am genuinely sorry." The room remained quiet. Monica studied him for a moment. There was no anger in her expression, no desire to embarrass him, only calm reflection. Finally, she offered a small nod. "Thank you for saying that." The simplicity of her response carried more power than anyone expected. In that moment, the discussion stopped being about an investment. It became about character. And for the first time all day, Ethan Caldwell began earning back the respect he had nearly lost. The board meeting concluded shortly before sunset, but the effects of that afternoon continued long after people left the conference room. The investment committee finalized its recommendation, and the partnership moved forward. Yet the largest discussion throughout the building was not about the $340 million investment. It was about the lesson everyone had witnessed. As executives gathered their documents and prepared to leave, Monica Reynolds remained seated for a few moments near the windows overlooking Chicago. The skyline glowed beneath the warm colors of late afternoon. Golden sunlight reflected from hundreds of glass towers, filling the boardroom with a soft light that seemed to quiet the room. Several board members stopped to thank Monica for her leadership. Others praised her thoughtful approach throughout the review process. She accepted every compliment with the same humility she had displayed all day. Across the room, Ethan Caldwell stood near the doorway speaking with senior executives. The partnership had been approved, but he found himself thinking less about the agreement and more about the events that led to it. For years, he had measured leadership through results, efficiency, and performance. Monica had reminded him that leadership also required self-awareness. It required recognizing value before titles revealed it. As the room gradually emptied, Monica gathered her papers and prepared to leave. Ethan approached carefully. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. Monica looked up and smiled politely. Of course. They walked together toward the windows. Below them, traffic moved through the city while evening sunlight painted long shadows across the streets. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. I spent most of my career believing I was good at reading people. Monica listened quietly. Today proved otherwise. Ethan gave a small, honest laugh. I suppose it did. Monica looked toward the skyline. Everyone makes mistakes. Ethan nodded. Not everyone gets the opportunity to learn from them. The conversation remained simple, yet meaningful. There was no bitterness. No attempt to revisit every detail of the day. The focus remained on what came next. Ethan asked thoughtful questions about organizational culture, employee development, and leadership accountability. Monica shared observations gathered throughout her years working with companies across the country. She spoke about the importance of creating environments where people felt seen, heard, and respected. Not because it improved public image. Not because it generated profit. But because it was the right thing to do. By the time they returned to the hallway, several new ideas had already begun forming. Later that evening, Ethan gathered his executive leadership team for one final conversation before everyone went home. He announced plans to review hiring practices, leadership training, employee development programs, and workplace culture initiatives. Some executives appeared surprised by the urgency in his voice. Others quietly understood why. Down in the lobby, employees finished their shifts while sunlight slowly faded beyond the glass walls. The receptionist smiled as Monica approached the exit. "Thank you again for helping me this morning," she said. Monica smiled warmly. "You never needed my help. You just needed confidence." The young woman beamed. Nearby, the security officer thanked Monica for her patience and professionalism. She shook his hand and wished him a good evening. As she stepped outside, the cool Chicago air greeted her. Behind her, the building remained illuminated by the final glow of sunset. Inside those walls, a partnership had been secured. But something more important had happened as well. A company had been given an opportunity to become better than it had been the day before. And unlike financial investments, that kind of growth could not be measured on a spreadsheet. 6 months later, winter sunlight filtered through the towering glass walls of Caldwell Technologies, casting pale golden reflections across the marble lobby where everything had once begun. Outside, downtown Chicago moved beneath a cold blue sky. People hurried along sidewalks bundled in coats, while traffic flowed steadily through the city. Inside the building, however, the atmosphere felt entirely different from the one Monica Reynolds had encountered on that unforgettable afternoon. Employees greeted one another by name. Managers stopped to listen instead of rushing past conversations. New hires moved through orientation programs designed not only to teach company procedures, but also to reinforce respect, inclusion, and leadership accountability. The changes had not happened overnight. They had been built one decision at a time. Ethan Caldwell stood near the reception area reviewing notes before a meeting. Months earlier, he would have walked through the lobby without noticing the people around him. Now he greeted the receptionist before asking about her family. He thanked the security officer for his work. He paused to encourage a young employee preparing for a presentation. These moments seemed small, but together they had reshaped the culture of the organization. Across the building, framed photographs now displayed community initiatives, employee mentoring programs, and leadership workshops launched after the partnership began. The investment itself had exceeded expectations. Growth remained strong. New opportunities continued to emerge. Yet many employees believed the most valuable outcome had nothing to do with revenue. It was the sense that people mattered. Late that afternoon, a familiar figure stepped through the revolving doors. Monica Reynolds entered the lobby carrying the same worn leather briefcase she had carried on her first visit. Several employees immediately smiled when they saw her. The receptionist stood to greet her. The security officer shook her hand warmly. Even people who had never met her knew her story. Not because she had spoken about it, but because the lesson had become part of the company's identity. Ethan noticed her arrival and walked across the lobby. The two exchanged a warm greeting before standing near the windows overlooking the city. Snow flurries drifted gently beyond the glass. "The place feels different," Monica said. Ethan followed her gaze across the lobby. Employees were talking, collaborating, and helping one another as the workday slowly came to an end. "It is different," he replied quietly. Monica smiled. She did not need a report to measure the change. She could see it in the people. Nearby, Olivia watched from the mezzanine level above. She remembered the day her father had made assumptions about a woman sitting quietly by a window. She remembered the shock that followed and the lessons that emerged afterward. Looking down now, it was difficult to imagine the company returning to what it had once been. As evening approached, Monica prepared to leave. She thanked several employees and made her way toward the entrance. Ethan walked with her to the doors. Neither felt the need to discuss the past. The future had already answered it. Outside, the city glowed beneath streetlights and the fading colors of sunset. Monica stepped onto the sidewalk and disappeared into the movement of downtown Chicago. Ethan remained inside for a moment, watching through the glass. Then he turned back toward the lobby filled with conversation, laughter, and purpose. The snow continued falling softly outside, while warm light filled the building behind him. And in the quiet simplicity of that moment, the lesson remained clear. The value of a person is never revealed by where they sit, how they dress, or what others assume about them. It is revealed by their character long before the world learns their title.